Recently, all it took for the Ebola virus to jump over the border between the Congo and Uganda in Africa was an infected group of 6 people crossing via a footpath. Since then, a 5-year-old boy on the Ugandan side died from the Ebola disease after vomiting up blood. Fox reported the stubbornness of Congolese is a challenge in screening. A Ugandan Red Cross official, Francis Tumwine, told the Associated Press at one border crossing last week they have failed to understand that Ebola is there. They think that it is witchcraft which is killing them. Meanwhile, hundreds of Congolese refugees were dumped in San Antonio, Texas, and then bussed into the interior of the United States, disappearing into the population without travel documents and/or host homes.
Before, months ago, they still had to have travel documents, but the federal government stopped making that kind of like a policy, right? And because they can still grant asylum to anyone, even if they don't have asylum. They don't have host homes.
And there is a network of providers offering cash assistance to refugees. Just 2 years ago, Reuters reported on George Soros's Humanity Ventures, earmarking $500 million to ensure that refugees can enter the United States en masse. The state-funded Refugee Cash Assistance Plan helps refugees acquire apartments with furnishings, food and clothing, school registration, etc.
All of them, again, have received asylum from the federal government. Can't be clear enough about that.
Right.
So I know there's a lot of conspiracy out there about that, but that's true.
Right.
Like these are, even the Congolese that got asylum, right? Was frustrated about that. They did not get assigned host homes. I have no idea why they were not like that. You'd have to ask the federal government why they released migrants without host homes assigned, because that's usually not protocol.
U.S. border town seeks African dialect speakers as hundreds of Africans cross from Mexico. That's today. That's hundreds more today. Exactly what Border Patrol told me this morning. They said, yeah, Mr. Jones, we're really freaked out. Do you know why Fox News won't cover this? Do you know why the president isn't talking about the Ebola threat? Because we'll be honest with you, just like years ago, we just go down the line, and nothing against you, but it'd be bigger if Fox did this. And I go, I understand. They go, but we know that you'll get it out, and maybe Matt Drudge will get it out. A normal news editor at a major paper would spend days just on this topic. This is so huge. This is like giant kahuna level insane. I live here. I have 4 children here. We're already seeing drug-resistant whooping cough and TB. It's everywhere. People are dying, and I know.
Of course, the Mockingbird media quickly grabbed the master narrative and spread their propaganda to local stations across the country, claiming independent media was misleading. Get a load of how National Newsboy arrogantly uses the same sources yet comes to a different, misleading conclusion.
That is the direct headline being shared on social media right now. It's a case of 2 facts being put together in a misleading way. Here's how we know, starting with our sources. The City of San Antonio, Customs and Border Protection, the World Health Organization, and my colleagues at Ken's in San Antonio. Now, it is true that Congolese refugees come from a country with an Ebola outbreak. That's the second fact here. But if you stop there, you miss important context. The CBP confirmed to Verify that they monitor all immigrants to the country and have tests to identify cases of Ebola. They have had no encounters of Ebola along the southwest border. Bottom line, headlines like this are misleading. While Congo is having an Ebola outbreak, immigrants from the country are tested, and there's no evidence that they are carrying any dangerous virus into the U.S.
Yet the article never claims that they are carrying the Ebola virus, Captain Verify. The article is simply concerned that an outbreak of this potential magnitude isn't a top priority. Oh, that's right, we aren't allowed to ask relevant questions, I forgot. Where were these monitors in 2014? During the 2014 to 2016 Ebola outbreak in the United States, where 11 people were treated, including an Ebola-infected 45-year-old man who, according to the CDC, was treated for possible sinusitis and discharged. 3 days later, the man returned to the hospital by ambulance with a persistent fever, abdominal pain, and new onset diarrhea. 2 days later, the Texas Department of State Health Services and the CDC confirmed that patient 1 was positive for the Ebola virus. 8 days later, he was dead. He had also infected a Dallas, Texas nurse.
A second nurse in Dallas has tested positive for Ebola. Amber Vinson is, for now, in stable condition, but her case is raising serious concerns that measures they're using to contain Ebola are not measuring up.
That was one man who sought treatment. Of course, we are told we have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, so they don't have Ebola. Ebola would be transferred within 21 days, right? These migrants have been traveling. The ones if you're talking about from the Congo would have gotten Ebola months ago through their travels. So Ebola is not really a concern.
Do you feel totally confident that there is no threat of disease at this facility?
I feel totally confident that there is no threat of Ebola at this facility. We are told that they're doing background checks and that they're doing medical screenings, and then they're being given paperwork to appear in the ICE or asylum seeking court.
What percentage of the people show up for the asylum hearing?
So it depends on the demographic, the court, but we do see too many cases where people are not showing up. We did an expedited pilot with family units this year with ICE and the immigration courts. Out of those 7,000 cases, 90 received final orders of removal in absentia, 90%.
90% did not show up?
Correct.
Okay.
I am totally confident that there is no risk of Ebola here in the city of San Antonio.
Have you checked all the medical records of everybody that comes through this facility?
No, but because Ebola has an incubation period of 21 days, and these folks have been traveling for 6 and 7 months.
I think you as a doctor know that that's not a good excuse, though, because you know disease can travel with people.
So are you asking me questions?
Yes.
I've answered your questions. Is there any other question I can answer?
In a study that's cited in the National Library of Medicine, a study was published by The Lancet Medical Journal. That study found that nearly 100% of the people that they studied from Africa had antibodies for Ebola. What does that mean? It means that, according to mainstream science, that almost 100% of those people were exposed to Ebola, but it didn't kill them. In fact, they showed no symptoms. And what can happen, even after you build antibodies, there can be viral fragments or viable viruses that continue to persist throughout your body. And they can exist in body fluids, such as mucus or semen or blood, of course, or other body fluids. And this is how many viral diseases spread, including Ebola. But what happens when you have essentially dormant Ebola that's in a person's body, showing no symptoms? And the science has also shown that some of those people will not test positive for Ebola right away. They can have Ebola for a period of time, in other words, and show no symptoms, and not even test positive for Ebola if there's a medical test given. If those individuals arrive in the United States, and then they begin to, for example, in whatever way you might imagine, share body fluids with the American people, who may not be from Africa and may be more susceptible to these infections, you could theoretically get dormant Ebola from a carrier who has no symptoms suddenly transforming into active Ebola in someone who has no immunity.
But all it takes is a tiny bit of common sense to realize that an Ebola outbreak could happen at any moment, as there are hundreds of Congolese refugees starting their journey north from as far south as Brazil and Ecuador. All it would take is one to infect hundreds of immigrants that are migrating north by the thousands.
Well, what if it continued to spread? What if it starts spreading outside of a hospital environment? What if it spreads in a migrant processing center? What if it spreads on the streets of San Francisco, the streets of Los Angeles, that are already filthy places with almost no real hygiene going on, and they're being abandoned, the homeless people are being abandoned there by, the Democrats in charge of those cities. If you get Ebola mixed in with those kinds of environments, you probably cannot stop it without extreme medical police state measures.
And even though every source in this report is 100% verifiable, you've been told by your minders that this is fake news. Or is it? John Bound reporting.